Greetings, friends. Welcome to the Grit and Equity Talk podcast with yours truly, Dr. India White. I'm super thrilled to be here with each of you rock stars. So thankful that you have tuned in to this podcast. I hope that your Thursday has been fabulous. I hope you're getting things done. You educators out there, wrapping up the school year, administrators, superintendents, preparing for the new year, looking at the budget, looking at graduation rates and all that good stuff, preparing for summer school. And it never stops, right? Well, whatever you do, remember to stay gritty, but take care of yourself. You're very valuable. So, with that said, I'm going to get into the show. But before I get started, I want to make some announcements. So, first things first, the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with Dr. India White will be featured on the X Factor EDU network, hosted by Dr. Matthew Joseph, and it will also be featured on Spotify. It will also be on the main social media outlets on my channel. So if you can tune in, we would be so thankful for that. If you're wanting to partner with us, sponsor, things like that, there are plenty of opportunities. Reach out to Dr. Matthew Joseph for that. Now, speaking of social media, follow me, guys, okay? My Facebook is Miss India White. LinkedIn is The India White. Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram is Indie238. YouTube is India White 123. And TikTok is Dr. India White. I want to remind you of the show's objectives. So if you are trying to close the achievement gap, but you're having classroom management issues, or if your students just aren't motivated to do the work, then this Grit and Equity Talks podcast is for you. We're going to cover a plethora of topics around grit, equitable practices, and more. So thanks for joining me. Now, also, I wanted to remind you, I have a couple of upcoming events. I hope to see y'all. Okay, I have a wonderful conference Savas is putting on in Las Vegas at the end of this month. I hope to see many of you rockstar educators there. So, and make sure you let me know if you tuned in and saw the show. I love that when you guys come up to me and you're like, "Hey, I'm fine." Anyway, also, I'm excited to be a speaker at FCTM this year in June in Orlando. I will see many of you at Camp Conference as I'm going to be a featured speaker there. NCSM, I've got a couple of gigs there. I'm honored to be a major speaker and just to be blessed to be among you guys. NCTM, I'll be doing a little bit there. And ICTM, I will have a featured speaker session as well in October. And there are some other events that I will see you guys at throughout. Some are still being added to the schedule. If you're like, oh, we want to reach out, want to see if we can come speak, please don't hesitate. Reach out to me. I'm here to serve you, here to work with you. I also wanted to remind you guys to check out my website, www.india-white.com. Yes, for books, blogs, and to schedule me for a speaking event, coaching event, professional development, whatever we need to close the achievement gap for our students. I also wanted to let you guys know that I do have some really cool updates for you. I've got these Grit workbook Facebook groups. And so find your group. I have Grit workbook group for teachers, a Grit workbook Facebook group for leaders, administrators, for students, and ding, ding, ding for parents. I'm finally getting parents on board. Why? Somebody has to talk with our rockstar parents and guardians. Somebody's got to do it. Why not us? So if you're a parent out there and you're like, I do want to kind of consider Grit, I want to encourage you to check out that Facebook group and the new Grit workbook for parents that I also have that is newly released as well. So I also wanted to encourage you that whenever you get a chance to check out the Grit mini workshop on the Grassroots Workshop website, thank you, Robert and team, for that, called How to Harness Grit to Help Students Thrive. That is there for you. So utilize that with your team, with your department head, instructional coach, things like that. See how you can use that. I also wanted to just let you guys know I'm super excited. Can't wait to see you at conferences. I will be representing and just doing my best to support you however fit. Now, I want to get into the nitty-gritty of this topic, which will be we'll be talking today about overcoming criticism through grit. And you might be like, okay, what do you mean? So have you ever been in a situation where, your spirits are up, you're good, and then you perform or something happens, and then somebody gives you constructive feedback, or they just give you criticism? And this can go either way. Sometimes you get criticism and it's like, yes, it's like a build, it's like a boost. Other times you get criticized and it's cutting edge. It's like a dagger that goes through your soul, right? So I think of a time, trying to think of some times where I had criticism. So one time I remember was, yeah, I was a student. I was playing the saxophone, and my mom wanted me to play for friends in the neighborhood and for family. So I whipped out my sax and I started playing. Go altos, by the way. And I started playing, and I just remembered she asked me to play, and she's like, "Oh, is that all you got?" Like, and she like laughed, and it was horrible. It was gut wrenching, and it affected my confidence. It made it to where I just didn't feel like I was a musician, and I just lost all of my grit pretty much. However, fast forward senior year, I still played in the band and whatnot. I started doing okay. But senior year came around, and then University of Florida had the tryouts for the band. And I remember thinking of the time that my mom was like, "Oh, is that all you got?" And it really affected me as a musician to believe that I had the ability to play. And so now I want us to think and to take that in the same context of a math classroom, for instance, and say a student is working on an algebra problem and they're just not really the brightest when it comes down to how they're solving it, or they're missing some gaps within their, processes as they're working on their conceptual understanding, their procedure fluency, and it's obvious that something is missing. Whenever students receive constructive criticism, or I would say deconstructive, like to where it's harsh and cutting, like right to the core of them, it could really paralyze them. It could cause triggers and traumas. It could really make them feel like they have a low sense of self-efficacy, like they just really can't achieve in our math class. And then what happens is they shut down, and then they become very guarded. They don't want to be vulnerable in our presence. And it's to the place to where if we give that type of criticism, students won't even trust us with the simplest things. I am honestly a believer that people who are criticism kings and queens, that do it in a way to constantly cut down other people, I don't think it's necessarily the other person. Sometimes I think people deal with a habit of being that way because maybe when they were younger, they had to be like a leader in their home, or, leader on the team, things like that. And so they've kind of taken that role and said, okay, I'm going to just continue cutting everybody down, or finding the flaws and everything. And that they get high off that. Like, that's like their thing. I think that when we revisit that though, and you have to take a deeper look into that, even though that's great that they have an eye to see things, I want to challenge it to say, not only is it imperative to see things and to have an eye for criticism, it is also just as important to have a strategy for rebuilding and restoring people. I'm very leery of people who only have nothing but critical things to say, whether it's towards a student. I remember talking to a leader, and this still is was very triggering and traumatizing to me as a leader. We were in a space, and I remember the student came to one of our offices, and I just remember the student came and they asked about the student, and I asked about the student, like, who is this student? Like, I needed some background information. I needed to know what I was dealing with, right? I mean, it's just not necessarily, to stroke a bias or anything, just to know up front, like, who is this child? What grade are they in? And a leader said, "Oh, he's trash." And something about that just, it did not sit well with me. How do you call a student trash? How do you criticize someone, an entire human being, and call them trash and get paid for it. So I say this because when we are in the education space trying to work with children, we must understand that they're all coming from different backgrounds. Certain cultures are different than other cultures, but there should still be a defined sense of respect and humanism that is embraced around all students, and especially when they're sharing their thoughts with us. You know how valuable that is, that a student would open up and they would share out? Not every student has that confidence. And it's very easy sometimes to assume, right? Like, oh, well, of course, that's what you do in the classroom. Well, maybe not. And maybe when they go home, they don't have that sense of confidence. They don't have a parent or guardian that's building them up. So we have to be mindful of that. Now, I want to talk a little bit about now teachers and overcoming criticism as an educator or as a leader, and doing that by having grit. And so I want to talk about this because I just want to keep it real. I know we're at the end of the year, and we'll be getting teacher evaluations. We'll be reflecting on the year. There'll be introspection, and sometimes, you might not have someone in your corner cheering you on. You might have someone that is micromanaging your every move, or someone that is just looking at everything and picking it apart. And it's really affected the learning environment to where it's just this, it feels like the walls are caving in and like nobody wants to be there kind of thing. I want to encourage you to overcome any type of criticism through grit, having that great resilience in time, realizing that you're coming close to the end goal, right, of finishing out the school year strong. Remember to remain resilient. Continue to focus on your beginning of the school year goals, the beginning of the school semester goals, and continue to work on yourself. Another thing is when you're dealing with criticism, being careful, right, not to take it personally. And so with that said, I'm going to share a really cool article that I was able to find for us where they spoke about some tips that you could do when it came down to really overcoming criticism and not allowing it to get the best of you. All right, so here, this article is titled How to Handle Criticism. Where is it coming from? It's coming from Psychology Today. What do you do when you feel like others are rooting for you to fail? And then they have a Manjaro advertisement, which is not a part of the program. Best wishes to those that are on their journey there. Okay, so here it says, key points. The key to receiving criticism is to not let it diminish your self-confidence. If someone unfairly criticizes you, reflect on what they're saying and see if it's helpful or not. Get a clear understanding about who you are, what you're okay with, and what you're still working on. All right, so now let's keep reading. So it's saying here, it's never fair for someone to impose their opinion on you when you haven't asked for it. So you must be clear, because people will do that, right? In the leadership space, they will do that. So they're talking about here, just a simple example, if you're using some drugs or if a family is bugging you to stop, then you might have something that you have to change. But it says, if you know that the things your critics are ranting about don't reflect reality, that's the key, right? Does it really reflect reality, or is it like an opinion that they got from their livelihood bank of norms, if that makes sense, right? And then it says here, you deserve to be able, this is good, to fight your battles and to work on your changes on your own time without pressure to do things on other people's timelines or according to their opinions. This is you taking your power back. Again, that's you taking your power back. You deserve to be able to fight your battles and work on your challenges on your own time without pressure to do things. And the reason why this is so imperative is because you don't want something to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And criticism can do that for you. It says here, when someone unfairly criticizes you, reflecting on what they say might be helpful. And you can also consider which of your imperfections you're okay with and which ones you'd like to change. If you do this, you won't be so sensitive when a person points them out. That's good. That's good. So what they're saying is sometimes, yes, there is healthy criticism. We've got to be mindful of that. But at the same time, we still can remain in control. The biggest key here is whenever you're dealing with criticism as an educator, as a leader, and you're trying to overcome it, the biggest thing you want to do is you've got to have a foundation of who you are and your confidence, and then what can you tolerate versus what can you not tolerate. So if you're around someone, like say you're on a weight loss journey. So I have, I've been on weight loss journeys before, believe it or not, I have. And I remember a time where I was a little bit above my BMI, not too much, but hey, I could have worked on it. Hey, I'm still there. I mean, we're all there at times, right? Anyway, and so I was working on trying to get fit, but I was talking to someone and they just told me straight out, India, you are fat. What are you doing? Like, you are fat. And they just tore my little soul down. And I had to decide, how am I going to react to this? I had someone else that, came to my life, and, I was eating a certain item. We were out hanging out, and I was eating a certain item on the menu, and they told me that the item, basically they made me feel foolish. And they said, you ordered this? That's the dirtiest item on the menu. And when I heard that, something just hit my soul. Like, who says that right before you take a bite into an entree, right? So I say this because people that are critics, that are kings and queens at being critics, they're of a different mindset than many people. I don't think that critics usually come to the table all the time in love. I think they come in a lens of caution, but they're not seasoned with how they give criticism. And so then it turns into cutting detrimental damage. And unfortunately, we as leaders, we have people that speak into our lives, right? That can do the same. And unbeknownst to them, they are causing great damage. And this is why we have to be very mindful that we're not critics to a point of detriment, that it's harming children or harming our peers because of our opinions, especially if we've not walked in their shoes. So the person that told me, for instance, that I was eating the dirtiest item on the menu, what they did not realize was that that was a healthy choice for me, right? Because I was trying to make health conscious decisions on which meats to get, which, veggies to get, to, just make sure I'm okay. And so I actually was proud of my decision because I'm like, oh, I'm eating healthy. And they just tanked it, right? Did they mean to? I'm sure they didn't, but I thought it was very immature to say something like that right before somebody bites into an entree. I think, for instance, if you're out eating with someone and they're enjoying a triple chocolate fudge cake, what is it our opinion, right, to say, why are you're gonna gain 2,000 calories, girl? Instead of doing that, I think the opposite of criticism is empathy. Being able to say, you know what? I don't know their situation. I don't know if maybe they haven't had a triple chocolate fudge cake in 3 months, and this is their first time treating themselves, and they like my company. So they decided that they would do it around me and they feel safe. And because I usually celebrate them. What if? Or maybe they like a triple chocolate fudge cake because it's their birthday, or it's a birthday treat for them from last week. They didn't get a chance to get it. Or maybe they just want a triple chocolate fudge cake. What's it to us, right? Like when you think of the big package, criticism has to be strategic. And we have to explain why there is criticism if we're going to have a lens of criticism. And we have to build a relationship. There has to be trust. There has to be love before we belch out criticism. Because if not, then it can turn into damage, emotional damage for students and for leaders alike. And so I want to keep sharing the screen because I want to go back into the clip that we were watching, or that we were reading together. So it says, how do you then respond to unfair criticism? I wish I would have had that there. before my episode. So, how do you respond to unfair criticism? The first step is to get clear about who you are, what you're okay with, and what you're still working on, right? Now, then it says here, sometimes you have to put boundaries in place. And listen, if I'm going to say something, it says, put boundaries in place with people in your life and repeatedly ask them to be more respectful of your choices. But if they continue to be critical, it says maybe, you'll know what you need to work on, but that person just won't let go. Then, you remind them of it, or they remind you of it every chance they get. So it's talking about some situation here. One of my clients came to me soon after getting a divorce. He explained he and his wife grew apart. She left him for another man. His mom felt like, or his mom never liked his wife, and she constantly complained. Once the divorce was finalized, all he heard was, "I told you so. None of this would have happened if you would have listened to me." And so he admitted that even though some of her points, his mom's points now were valid, he should have worked on some of those things earlier in the marriage, right? But her constant criticizing and rooting for his marriage to fail did not help either. She was one of the wedges that drove him apart from his wife, right? And so he says, as he says, she's trying to help in her way, but it's too much. I get it. My marriage didn't work. I want to go back to the sentence. This is the point of criticism. She's trying to help in her way, but it's too much. This is where we don't want to be. When students, and this is the power of giving feedback, constructive, healthy feedback when students are missing problems. Instead of, no, you didn't get it wrong. Oh, you didn't get it right. What are you doing? No, you don't talk to children like that. They're fragile. They're precious, right? Your goal is to mold them, to help them. So if they get the problem wrong, you can say, close. Let's look at it again. Let's try it again. I like your thinking right here. Let's see where we went, where we started doing something a little bit different. Talk to me. Let's talk. But you have to also have a relationship with them to get to that point. And so I want to go back to what the man said. He said she was trying to help in her own way, but it was too much. And this is what happens when sometimes as educators, we are so knowledgeable. We love our topic, especially our mathy people. We love our topic, but do we fall so much in love with the topic and in our comprehension of it that when we try to relay criticism or feedback to children, it is an overwhelming, like, freight train or like a truckload full of criticism and knowledge that is way beyond their years, because we just get flustered or we just whatever. What are we doing there? I want to challenge all of us to do better at making sure we're slowing down enough, not just wait time, but providing feedback after a quiz, after a test, after practice problems and whatever it is that you're doing, to make sure that our children are still being humanized and valued and treated with dignity and respect in our presence. Now, if you are an adult, it's a little bit different, right? Because you're with adults in the room. And if you are receiving criticism on a constant basis, I want to encourage you to keep your head up, especially educators, because you are valuable and you're irreplaceable. Also, do not take it personal. Like, so for instance, the persons that have cut me down, the ones that have called me fat, that said, that I was stupid, when I was in high school, from the people that, cut me down because of items I ordered on a menu, whatever it was. Sometimes you have to take a step back and remove yourself and say, is it me or is it them? And sometimes the issue is bigger than you. It's not always you. I remember working in one of the high schools, and we received much criticism from the students. It was a very rough experience. And sometimes we got cursed out every day. Listen, we got cursed out probably every day, to the point we could not write discipline referrals. I wasn't the type to want to write discipline referrals anyway. Like, I on purpose would not learn the discipline system, because I just know I'm here to help students win and, because you build relationships, you don't need it. Anyway, but I remember we were going through so much. And at the time, it was the department head and I. And she would just, after classes, she would just look at me and she'd say, India, it's not us. We are not crazy. We are not losing it. And it was so funny because that's how we got through it. Because the stories we had, if people only knew what we went through just to teach. Um, but we had so much criticism that we had to develop like this war mindset of like, we're not letting anything that is said to us, thrown at us, whatever, to defeat us as educators. And we have to learn to laugh at some of the stuff. And that's another thing, learning to laugh at it and not to take everything face value. Learning to forgive those that fall short with that. And for those out there that maybe you love being a critical person, I think that's wonderful that you want to help students or that you want to help leaders. Thank you. But I just want to challenge you and ask, before you say the next thing that you have noticed, can you please first empathize with the person, and instead of jumping to conclusions and saying, oh, I've got to say this because whatever, can you first try to put yourself in that situation and understand the big picture as to why they're doing what they're doing, why they make the decisions they're making, why they're hanging out with the people they're hanging out with. Like, we don't know every single situation and all of the details at times, right? So I just want to caution those that are like loving to be critics. Please do it with seasoning and love and empathy. And especially in the classroom, there is nothing wrong with constructive feedback and criticism. We need that so that students can learn from errors and misconceptions and, whether it's error analysis and all the stuff. Great. But we've got to do it in love. We've got to do it with velvet gloves. And we've got to do it in a way where the students want to try again. They want to open up again. They want to say, oh, I missed it. Can you tell me what I did wrong? Oh, but they can't do that if they feel like the knowledge that we're going to give back is going to be cutting and jarring and destroying the little souls. Like, we've got to be mindful of how we're relaying that information. So with that said, I just want to just thank you guys for listening in. And I hope that, many of you guys can, continue to walk in victory and that you can overcome criticism through resilience. And I want to say that, another part of this is having that, growth mindset, positive optimism, optimistic thoughts, to where it's not the end all be all because I ordered the wrong menu, because I put on 2,000 calories. I just know I have to work out that much harder, right? Like, I mean, it's just being gentle with yourself, even if you have those shortcomings. And if you are someone that's been overly, critical, hey, this is a good time for reflection. This is a good time to say, okay, I know a lot, I see a lot, but let me empathize a little bit, put myself in people's shoes more, slow down a little bit more, do a little bit more active listening, find out, more of the situation, and then listen. When I do find out the situation, don't use it against them, but see how can I be a person to help people heal, to help, students heal, help students be better, students, and help leaders be better leaders whenever I see their flaws. So with that said, thank you guys so much for having me again on the Grit and Equity Talks podcast. It is a blessing to be able to come among y'all. I'm thankful for every single one of you and the work you do day in and day out. It is paying off. We are finishing up the school year. We're staying gritty. And I'm just so thankful to be a part of your tribe. And so with that said, I wanted to remind you, check out my website, www.india-white.com, for books, blogs, or to schedule me for your next speaking or coaching event. Also, this podcast, the Grit and Equity Talks podcast, will be featured on the X Factor EDU podcast, but it will also be featured on Spotify and on social media outlets and on YouTube. So you could find it everywhere. Also, check me out on social media. I would love for you to follow me. And speaking of social media, I did create some new Grit workbook Facebook groups for y'all. So I have a Grit workbook Grit workbook group for teachers, a Grit workbook group for students, a Grit workbook group for administrators, a Grit workbook group for leaders, so you entrepreneurs and CEOs and business owners, and a Grit workbook group for parents, which also ties into my new launch of my Grit workbook for parents. So, woohoo! I hope you parents are happy. Also, whenever you get a chance, like I said, the social media handles are there. Facebook is Miss India White, LinkedIn is the India White, Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach, Instagram is Indie238, YouTube is India White 123, and TikTok is Dr. India White. And check out my Grit mini workshop on the Grassroots Workshop page titled How to Harness Grit to Help Students Thrive. We are here for you, so join up with us. Okay, check us out. Send me an email. And also, I hope to see y'all at some of these conferences, whether it's in Vegas in the end of the month, or if it's FCTM in June, or if it's July at the CAMPS conference, or NCSM, NCTM, or ICTM, or wherever else that is constantly going to be, I guess, being updated over time. I'm excited and I can't wait to see y'all. So, with that said, thanks again, guys, for joining me. Take care of yourself, okay? Have a wonderful night. And until next time, stay gritty.